So yeah, today I wanted to talk a bit about controlled vocabularies in Collectica, and how we're using DDI to implement those. And back up. All right, so yeah, I'm going to start off with a super brief introduction to Collectica, just in case anybody's not familiar generally with what we're up to, and then talk a little bit about why and what controlled vocabularies are, how DDI supports those, and how finally Collectica supports those. All right, my mouse wheel's a little jumpy. That's all right. So yeah, to start off with what is a controlled vocabulary, basically it's just an organized set of terms that you can use. And we'll show some examples, and I think that'll make more sense. So as far as why to use any of these, the reasons that I see that make them nice are that it makes it easier to make the information consistent if everybody's working off of the same set of terms for a certain field. And then for search, it makes it a lot easier to do the indexing and to do faceted search compared to just free text fields. So some examples of vocabularies, looking at a couple organizations that publish these. So first of all, DDI does maintain and publish a number of controlled vocabularies. I'll click through to take a look at these. So on the DDI Alliance site, if you go to products and then controlled vocabularies, you'll get to all of them that the Alliance publishes. And there's a good number, it's something around 20 probably. And just to take a look at, let's use the analysis unit as the example. If we go there, we'll see that there's a number of different options, individuals, organizations, and a bunch more. They can be hierarchical. DDI uses this, the period or the dot to separate the levels of the hierarchy. They provide nice labels and descriptions that explain what exactly each term means. You can see them in HTML like I looked at. You can also download them in a format called generic code or as an Excel spreadsheet. And as you can see, there's a bunch of different vocabularies here. So another provider of vocabularies is CESDA. So they provide a vocabulary service that we can click through to. And they kind of mirror all of the DDI controlled vocabularies, which is nice, and they provide them in some extra formats. And I think they also have a few of their own vocabularies that are here, like especially the topic classification I'm aware of. We were just looking at analysis unit on the DDI site. So if we click through on CESDA, we'll see the similar information. They format the HTML a bit differently. And the really neat thing they do, I think, is under the export download, excuse me, they make these available in a few different formats. So PDF is fine, but SCOS is super nice. So that's an RDF-based format we can download it in, and that'll come in handy a little bit later in the demonstration. So yeah, controlled vocabularies in DDI. DDI supports using controlled vocabularies a number of ways. First, as we saw on their website, they maintain and publish, I guess I counted 23 of these controlled vocabularies. There's a working group that's responsible for, making sure the terms make sense and they're complete and all that kind of stuff. A second way that the DDI supports these vocabularies is within the DDI lifecycle standard. Many fields can use controlled vocabularies. And the way they do this is through this code value property type. So I'm going to click through to the documentation for code value, which will help show us. There we go. Helps show us where these can be used. And it's a large number of places. So the first part here is the actual properties on the code value type, which lets you basically specify the identifier of the vocabulary and then the identifier of the value of the term from that vocabulary that you're specifying. But the interesting thing I wanted to show was this relationship section. This shows all the fields in DDI that can make use of these controlled vocabularies. So if we just click the first one, approval review, we'd see that within this approval review type, it's the type of approval review can be that code value type. And so that field can be from a vocabulary. It's worth noting that whenever you have this code value type in DDI lifecycle, you can also just use plain text. If you don't want to say, here's my vocabulary's ID and the term from it, if you just want to enter text, you can. but it gives you the option of specifying the vocabulary and the explicit term. So yeah, going back to the others, as you can see, there's probably hundreds of these, or well over 100 anyway. Now looking at sampling plan, again, type of sampling plan, that can be from the vocabulary. Study unit can have the type of study unit, and I think there's more within here. If we search for code value, yeah, the analysis unit, which is the vocabulary we've seen, shows up there as well as the general data format. So you get the idea that many different fields within DDI can be specified from these vocabularies, and that can be super helpful. All right, so controlled vocabularies in Collectica. We introduced support for these in version 6.2, which was out earlier this year. The way we support these is we're able to import vocabularies from SCOS, so including those from the SESTA vocabulary service. We then store those as vocabularies. We store the vocabularies as DDI code lists. And the reason we do it that way is, one, because the format makes a lot of sense. You've got values, you've got terms that can be hierarchical, and we're doing this in DDI, so we felt that made sense. As an extra benefit, that means we can store them in the repository and they get managed and versioned and they can be referenced persistently that way. So next, then, we can configure vocabularies to be used for specific fields within our editors like Colectica Designer. And then when you're editing things like a study unit, for example, we can choose those terms from the vocabulary that's configured for a certain field. So I'm going to walk through doing this for a bit just to show how that works. So first, we're going to take a vocabulary or two from SCOS and ingest it. I think I'll just do one to start anyway. So yeah, back to the SESTA vocabulary service. I'm on the analysis units page there, and I went to that export download. And I'm just going to select all the languages. So I can click SCOS up there and then the download button down here. And it's going to save a file with a nice long name that has all the languages and versions of each language of that vocabulary. So I'll save that to my downloads folder. And then I'm going to go to Colectica Designer. And once I'm in here, let's see what I've got going on. I'm going to create a new metadata package to bring these into. So let's create a new checkout, make it a metadata package, and we'll call it EDDI Vocabularies. So the metadata package, in DDI, it's called the resource package. What this does is basically acts as packaging for many different item types. As you can see here, it starts empty. I'm going to do the import SCOS as code list and point at that file I just downloaded. So I downloaded it yesterday too to test it out, of course, which is why I have two of them. I guess it doesn't matter which one I choose because they're the same. So I'll hit open there, and it's going to tell me that it's created or updated these code lists called analysis unit, and it's added these labels in certain languages. The first time you import something, this message is a little much. The nice thing is, though, that I can re-import the same code list and it's going to match the existing code list in here, re-import the same vocabulary. And the nice thing about that is that means when the vocabulary is updated, I can just run the update again or the import again, and it'll only add the new things or make the appropriate changes. It's not going to create duplicate items. So we've got our analysis unit code list in here. I can drill into it to see all the things we'd expect from viewing it on the web. This one just has a little bit of hierarchy, but we can see that there. And of course, we can select any of these to get the labels and the descriptions. If we want to see the other languages, we can expand to see all the different languages that we had downloaded. So now that we've got this managed in DDI, I can go back to my list of demonstrations to make sure I'm not skipping anything. A couple of things I can do. Let's first configure it to be used as the field for something. And I'm not going to do that live because right now the configuration is not the nicest thing in the world, but I'll show how it looks. Right now it's based on text files, and it's meant to be configured by an administrator who deploys the application. So most users would not need to do this, but I'll show just how it works. So it's just a config file, a JSON config file that I'll open up and show that basically we're specifying the property name, which in this case is study-based.analysis unit. And then we give the identifier, the DDI-URN of the code list that has the terms from the vocabulary. And of course, you can have as many of these as you want. And the terms to use as property names are all documented. I can show that too. Documented on our documentation. So under the designer docs, you'd go admin and then control vocabulary config. And that shows you what the file needs to look like, and most importantly, what all those terms are. So these are all the fields within Collectica in our DDI editor that you can specify the control vocabularies for. And a lot of these do kind of double duty, like the coverage ones. Coverage can be used in many different item types like studies and data collections and many other places too. So I've got that configured already, as we saw. So next I'm going to create a study unit, and we'll try to pick a term from the vocabulary that we're seeing here. So let's do a new study. I'm going to create a new checkout, call it EDDI study. We could do a series or a study, but this time let's do a study. And of course, we can fill out all the text fields we want, the citation stuff. The analysis unit for a study is under the data tab, and we'll see the analysis unit here is usually a text box if you haven't configured a controlled vocabulary. But when we are saying that this term should come from a set of terms, we can just click that button and browse for the correct term that we want to set. So we can do that. And then maybe we'll just go publish it to the repository that I'm running locally. We'll say just a test or a demo. And it sent my study over. So hit finish there. I could also send the vocabularies over to the server as well. So let's publish those. All right, so once we've edited the study, assigning a term from the control vocabulary, now when we go to the web to see this, I've got the portal running here as well, I believe. We'll go to the studies, and EDDI study is the one I just published. And so we'll see, not surprisingly, the term from that vocabulary that we've put there. All right, so one other thing I wanted to demo is one other way that we can import these vocabularies. So going back to the CESDA vocabulary service, they maintain a very nice topic classification. And so I'm going to go there. And try to click through on it. Not sure why that's not going. Let's try this. Well, the good news is I downloaded it yesterday as well. So I've already got it in my downloads folder. So what I'm going to do is back in the vocabularies metadata package that I created, you might have noticed a different SCOS import command. And I just wanted to show how we can also import these vocabularies or classifications, however you want to look at a certain one, as a concept system in DDI, in addition to the option as a code list. And it's really depends what you want to do with the thing. If you're going to use it as a code value, as a CV in DDI, then the code list is the better option. But if you want it to be used for something else, like a concept system for grouping things or anything else, then the DDI concept system might be the better choice. So in this case, let's import the topic classification. That's the one I downloaded yesterday from the CESDA service. I'll hit open there. And it'll do a similar thing where it's adding all the content. It would be updating all the content if I'd done it a second time. So close that, and now we'll be able to scroll down and see the concept set that it's created and drill into that. And we'll see that it'll have the structure where we can drill into the different levels. And again, like before, get all the different details and all the different languages that are specified. So yeah, we could publish this as well. Send that over. And I mentioned using it to group things. So of course I haven't actually grouped anything by it, but you can see how within Collectica, we use these concept systems to power the explore view. So if you wanted to group variables or do concordance with conceptual variables according to this topic classification, that's a very quick way to start off, with the topic system, getting it into here.
5 minutes, Jeremy.
Thank you. All right, so that is what I wanted to demonstrate. Just a few thoughts on future improvements we plan to make to our controlled vocabulary support. So we want to make the configuration a bit nicer. So right now that is fine for the cases where the organization deploying it is kind of dictating that these are the terms we're going to use for these fields. And that works great because the sysadmins can create the config file and deploy it along with designer. Works well. But we'd also like to be able to let people choose terms from vocabularies without needing to do that. So maybe just an extra button next to the field that says choose a vocabulary to use and then choose a term. Secondly, we want to allow these vocabularies to be used for plain text fields because there's many of those in DDI as well that some organizations I think would like to pick terms from the vocabularies, even though they wouldn't be stored as code value in DDI lifecycle. We can still allow that nice browsing of the vocabulary to pick the term instead of having people need to type plain text for every field. Another idea might be we could ship with some of these vocabularies that DDI publishes so that people don't need to separately import them and maintain the DDI code lists. And then, of course, finally, we're always open to ideas from our customers or from other users who have ways they'd like to use control vocabularies. So yeah, with that, thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have.